Maya Jenkins was practically running through the airport, her sneakers squeaking against the shiny floor as she dodged between slow-walking families and business people glued to their phones. Her carry-on bag kept bumping against her side, and every few seconds she'd glance down at her watch, feeling her stomach tighten a little more each time. 28 minutes. That's all she had left before they started boarding her flight to Atlanta. She'd woken up late that morning. The alarm hadn't gone off. Or maybe she'd been so anxious about the interview that she'd slept right through it. Either way, she'd scrambled to get ready, barely had time to kiss her two boys goodbye before her neighbor arrived to watch them. And the traffic getting to the airport had been absolutely terrible. Now here she was, cutting it way too close for comfort, her heart pounding as she speed-walked through Terminal B. This wasn't just any flight. This wasn't just any interview. This was the opportunity she'd been praying for ever since the divorce finalized 8 months ago. A senior marketing position at a firm in Atlanta. Real money. The kind of salary that would mean she wouldn't have to choose between paying the electric bill and buying her son's new shoes. The kind of job that would let her breathe again after 2 years of barely keeping her head above water. Maya was so focused on her watch and the gate numbers flying past that she almost didn't see him. At the last second, she noticed the walker and managed to swerve, but her bag still clipped the edge of it. The elderly man stumbled slightly, and his boarding pass, along with his driver's license and what looked like some other papers, went scattering across the polished airport floor like autumn leaves in the wind. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Maya stopped immediately, her own urgency momentarily forgotten. The old man looked up at her, and she saw confusion and frustration in his eyes. He was trying to bend down to pick up his documents, but with the walker, it was clearly difficult for him. He was dressed simply in a soft cardigan that looked like it had seen better days and a pair of khaki pants. Nothing fancy, just an ordinary grandfather trying to travel somewhere. Maya glanced around, half expecting someone else to jump in and help. The airport was packed with people. Surely someone who wasn't about to miss their flight could stop for a minute. But everyone just kept moving, flowing around them like they were rocks in a stream. People were too busy, too focused on their own destinations, their own problems. She understood it. She really did, because right now she was one of those people with somewhere urgent to be. She looked at her watch again. 26 minutes now. Then she looked back at the old man who had managed to grab his boarding pass but was struggling to reach his license, which had slid a few feet away. Something about the way he looked, the slight tremor in his hands, the confusion on his face reminded her so much of her own grandfather before he passed. Pop used to get that same lost expression when things got overwhelming. Maya made a decision. She knelt down and started gathering the scattered papers. "Here, let me help you with that," she said, keeping her voice gentle and calm even though inside she was screaming about her flight. She handed him back his driver's license and boarding pass, along with what turned out to be a folded-up letter and a photo of a smiling elderly woman. "Thank you so much," the man said, his voice shaky but grateful. "I dropped everything. I'm usually not this clumsy, but I'm a bit out of sorts today." "It's no problem at all," Maya said, standing up and giving him a warm smile. "I'm Maya, by the way." "Henry," he replied, tucking the photo carefully into his cardigan pocket. Maya noticed how tenderly he handled it, and her heart squeezed a little. "I'm trying to get to my gate, but I'm afraid I'm a bit turned around. My daughter usually travels with me, but she couldn't make it this time. First time flying alone since..." He trailed off, and Maya saw the grief flash across his face. She glanced at the boarding pass in his hand. "Can I see that for just a second?" He handed it over, and Maya felt her stomach drop. Gate C-17. He was in the completely wrong terminal. She was in Terminal B, and her gate was B-32, which was still a good 5-minute walk away. Henry needed to be in Terminal C, which meant taking the train that connected the terminals, in rush hour. With crowds, she checked his boarding time. His flight was leaving in 20 minutes. Hers was leaving in about 25, but she still needed to get to her gate. And they always said to be there 30 minutes before departure for domestic flights. If she helped Henry get to Terminal C, made sure he found his gate okay, there was absolutely no way she was making her flight. Maya stood there, holding this stranger's boarding pass, doing the math in her head. She could point him toward the terminal train. She could even walk him there and make sure he got on okay, then sprint back to her own gate. Maybe she'd make it. Maybe the boarding would be delayed. Maybe they'd hold the plane. But as she looked at Henry, really looked at him, She saw how his hands were shaking slightly on the walker. She saw how confused he looked at all the signs and directions. She saw a man who was clearly struggling, who'd probably lost his wife recently based on that look of grief, who was trying to be brave and independent but was in over his head. "Okay, Henry," Maya said, her voice coming out more confident than she felt. "Let's get you to Terminal C." She pulled out her phone even as she said it. Her thumbs moved quickly across the screen, composing an email to the hiring manager at the Atlanta firm. "Dear Ms. Peterson, I am so sorry, but I've encountered an emergency at the airport and will miss my scheduled flight. Is there any possibility of rescheduling our interview? I remain extremely interested in the position and would be grateful for any flexibility you can offer." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she looked at Henry and gestured toward the terminal train signs. "It's not too far. We'll take our time and I'll make sure you get on that plane." "Oh no, dear, you'll miss your flight," Henry protested, having clearly overheard enough to understand what was happening. Maya just shook her head and smiled. "Some things are more important. Come on, let's go. What gate did you say? C-17? Okay, we can do this." They started walking and Maya immediately slowed her usual quick pace to match Henry's careful, deliberate steps. The walker made a rhythmic tapping sound against the floor. Tap, step, tap, step, tap, step. It was so much slower than she was used to moving, especially in an airport when she was in a hurry, but she didn't show any impatience. She stayed right beside him, close enough to help if he needed it, but not hovering in a way that would make him feel incapable. As they walked, Henry started talking. Maybe it was nerves, or maybe he was just the kind of person who got chatty when grateful. "I'm going to see my daughter in Phoenix," he explained. "She's been asking me to visit for months now, but I kept putting it off. After my wife Margaret passed, I just didn't feel much like traveling. We used to travel everywhere together, you see. She loved airports, loved flying. Said every trip was an adventure." Maya listened, really listened, even though part of her brain was tracking their progress and calculating whether Henry would make his flight. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said softly. "How long were you married?" 52 years, Henry said, and there was both pride and pain in his voice. "Met her when I was just a kid, really. 22 years old and thought I knew everything about the world. She taught me I didn't know anything at all." Maya smiled at that. They reached the terminal train and she helped Henry navigate onto it. The train was crowded, packed with annoyed business travelers and exhausted families with crying babies. Maya made sure Henry had something to hold on to as the train lurched forward. "What about you?" Henry asked. "Where are you headed? Or where were you headed, I suppose I should say." Maya hesitated, then figured why not tell him. It wasn't like keeping it secret would make missing the flight hurt any less. "Atlanta. I had a job interview. A really important one, actually. Been trying to get my career back on track after my divorce, and this position would have been a real game changer for me and my boys." She saw the color drain from Henry's face. "Oh no. Oh my dear, you shouldn't have given that up for me. We need to get you back to your gate. Surely there's still time." But Maya checked her watch and shook her head. "Even if I ran back right now, they'd probably already be boarding." "It's okay, Henry, really. I'll figure something out. Maybe they'll let me reschedule." The terminal train pulled into Terminal C and they got off, Henry moving carefully down the small step. Maya checked the gate signs and started leading him in the right direction. C-17 was all the way at the end of the terminal naturally. It was always the way, wasn't it? The gates you needed were always the furthest ones away. As they walked, they kept talking. Henry told her about his 3 children and 7 grandchildren. He pulled out his phone and showed her pictures, his face lighting up with such obvious love that it made Maya's heart warm. She told him about her own sons, Michael, who was 15 and loved basketball, and David, who was 13 and never stopped asking questions about how everything worked. "Single mother of 2 teenage boys," Henry said, shaking his head with a smile. "You must be one tough lady," Maya laughed. "Some days I feel tough. Other days I feel like I'm barely hanging on by my fingernails. But we manage. We always manage somehow." They were about halfway to the gate when Maya noticed Henry was breathing a bit harder. His steps had slowed even more, and there was a slight wheeze in his breath. "Henry, why don't we stop for a minute?" she suggested. "There's a cafe right here. Let's get you some water and let you rest for a second." "But my flight," Henry protested weakly. "You've still got time. 10 minutes. That's plenty. Come on." She guided him to a small table outside the cafe and got him settled before going in and buying 2 bottles of water. As she paid, she heard the announcement for her own flight beginning to board. Final call for passengers heading to Atlanta. Her throat got tight and she blinked back tears. That was it then. That was really it. The job was gone. But when she came back out and saw Henry gratefully accepting the water bottle, saw him smile at her with such genuine warmth and appreciation, she knew she'd made the right choice. Maybe the only choice she could have made, and still been able to look at herself in the mirror. After Henry had caught his breath and finished his water, they continued their walk to gate C-17. Maya kept checking her phone, half hoping for a miracle response from the hiring manager, but knowing deep down it wouldn't come. Companies didn't usually reschedule interviews for candidates who missed flights no matter what the reason. There were always other qualified people who showed up on time. They reached the gate with about 7 minutes to spare before boarding ended. The gate agent, a young woman who looked like she'd had a very long day, barely glanced up from her computer screen as they approached. Maya could see the weariness in every line of her face, the way her shoulders slumped, the mechanical movements as she processed boarding passes for the last few stragglers. "Here we are," Maya said, trying to sound cheerful. "Gate C-17, right on time." Henry turned to her and his eyes were actually misty with tears. He reached out and grasped her hand with both of his, and Maya was surprised by how strong his grip was despite the tremor in his fingers. "I cannot thank you enough for this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You sacrificed something very important for a complete stranger. I don't know many people who would have done that." Maya felt her own eyes getting watery and blinked quickly. "You remind me of my grandfather," she admitted. "He raised me after my parents died when I was little. I couldn't have just walked past you. He wouldn't have wanted me to be that kind of person." "He did a good job then," Henry said firmly. "He raised someone with real character. That's rare these days." They stood there for a moment, just 2 people who'd met by chance, connected by a simple act of kindness. Then Henry did something that caught Maya completely off guard. He let go of her hand and reached for his wallet, pulling it out of his back pocket. It was old leather, worn soft with years of use, and when he opened it, Maya could see it was stuffed with bills. "Please," Henry said, pulling out what looked like several $100s. "Please let me give you something. For missing your flight, for the interview, for everything. I can't just let you walk away after what you've done." Maya immediately put her hands up and stepped back slightly. "No, Henry, absolutely not. I didn't help you for money. I helped you because it was the right thing to do. Please put that away." "But you lost a job opportunity because of me," Henry insisted, still holding out the money. "At least let me cover your costs." "A new flight, whatever you need." "Henry, I mean this with all respect, but no. I made my choice. I knew what I was doing. Taking money for it would make it feel like a transaction, and it wasn't. It was just one human being helping another. That's all." Henry looked frustrated now, like he wasn't used to people refusing his help or his money. He stood there for a long moment, the bills still in his hand, clearly struggling with how to handle this situation. Finally, he put the money back in his wallet, but he still didn't look satisfied. "Then at least," he said, his voice taking on a tone that was almost pleading, "at least let me get your contact information. Your email, your phone number, something. I would like to be able to properly thank you somehow. Please don't make an old man feel helpless." Maya hesitated. She really didn't want anything from this interaction. She hadn't helped Henry to get something out of it. But she could see how much it mattered to him, how distressed he was at the idea of not being able to express his gratitude properly. And maybe, she thought, it would be nice to know he got home safely. Maybe they could stay in touch just as friends. He reminded her so much of her grandfather after all. "Okay," she finally agreed. She pulled a receipt from her purse and a pen, scribbling down her name, email address, and phone number. "But seriously, Henry, you don't owe me anything. I'm just glad I could help." Henry took the paper like it was something precious and carefully folded it, placing it in his wallet next to the photo of his late wife. "You're a blessing, Maya Jenkins. A real blessing. I hope you know that." They hugged then, a real hug, not one of those awkward side hugs strangers sometimes do. Henry smelled like Old Spice aftershave and peppermint candies, exactly like her grandfather used to smell. When they pulled apart, Maya had to wipe her eyes. "You better get on that plane," she said, trying to lighten the mood. "I didn't miss my flight just so you could miss yours." Henry laughed, a real laugh that made his whole face light up. You're right. Thank you again, my dear. Truly. Maya waited, standing at the gate, watching as Henry showed his boarding pass to the agent and slowly made his way down the jetway. He turned back once to wave, and she waved back, smiling. She stood there until she couldn't see him anymore, making sure he got on safely. Then, and only then, did she turn away and start the long walk back toward the ticketing area. The adrenaline that had been keeping her going started to fade, and the reality of what she'd done began to sink in like a weight in her chest. She'd missed her flight. She'd missed her interview. She'd probably lost the job opportunity, and all for a stranger she'd never see again. The walk back felt 10 times longer than the walk there. The terminal train was even more crowded now, if that was possible, and Maya had to stand pressed between a businessman who smelled like too much cologne and a woman with a screaming toddler. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about what she was going to tell her boys. They'd been so excited when she told them about the interview. Michael had even picked out which tie she should wear, like he was the fashion expert. When she finally reached the ticket counter in Terminal B, there was a line, of course. There was always a line. Maya stood there, shifting her weight from foot to foot, checking her phone compulsively even though she knew there'd be no good news waiting. No miracle email saying the interview had been rescheduled. No winning lottery ticket notification, just the usual junk emails and a text from her neighbor asking what time she'd be home. "Next guest, please," the ticket agent called, and Maya stepped forward. The agent was a middle-aged man with tired eyes who looked like he'd heard every excuse and sob story in the book. "Hi," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I missed my flight to Atlanta. I need to book the next available one, please." The agent typed on his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He frowned. "Next available isn't until tomorrow evening. Flight 2847 departing at 6:30 p.m. tomorrow evening." That was more than 24 hours away. The interview was this evening at 6. There was no way. Even if the hiring manager agreed to reschedule, which was unlikely, would they wait that long? Maya doubted it, and the cost, she asked, even though she already knew this was going to hurt. "Well, since you missed your original flight, you'll need to purchase a new ticket. That'll be $843. Maya actually felt dizzy. $843. Her original ticket had cost $400, and that had already stretched her budget to the breaking point. $843 would mean her credit card would be maxed out. It would mean no emergency fund. It would mean rice and beans for dinner for the next month, and praying that nothing unexpected came up with the boys or the car. But what choice did she have? She needed to get to Atlanta, even if just to try to salvage something from this disaster. Maybe she could meet with the hiring manager in person, explain what happened, show them she was serious about the position. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll take it." She handed over her credit card and tried not to think about the bill that would come next month. The agent processed the payment, printed her boarding pass, and handed everything back with a mechanical, "Have a nice flight," that suggested he'd said those same words 10,000 times before. Maya walked away from the counter feeling completely deflated. She found a quiet corner near a closed restaurant and sat down on the floor, her back against the wall, her carry-on bag beside her. She pulled out her phone and called her neighbor. "Hey, Teresa. Yeah, I missed my flight. Long story. I won't be home until tomorrow. Would you be able to stay with the boys overnight? I'll pay you extra, of course." She listened to Teresa's kind reassurances that it was no problem, that the boys were fine, that they'd already eaten dinner and were doing homework. "Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Tell them I love them, okay?" After she hung up, Maya just sat there for a while, watching people rush past. Everyone had somewhere to be, something important to do. She wondered how many of them would have stopped to help Henry. She wondered if she'd been stupid to do it. Maybe her grandfather's lessons about helping others were outdated. Maybe in this world you had to put yourself first or you'd end up left behind. But even as she thought it, she knew she didn't really believe it. She'd made her choice, and she couldn't regret it, not really. Yes, it had cost her. Maybe it had cost her a lot. But she'd looked at herself in the mirror this morning as a woman who would help someone in need even when it hurt. That had to count for something, didn't it? Maya spent that night in the airport. She couldn't afford a hotel, not after the ticket cost. She found a relatively quiet spot in Terminal A, where the overnight cleaning crews didn't seem to mind her camping out. She used her carry-on as a pillow and her jacket as a blanket, and she dozed on and off, never really sleeping deeply. Every announcement jolted her awake. Every set of footsteps made her eyes pop open. Around 3 in the morning, when the airport was as quiet as it ever got, she pulled out her phone and Googled the hiring manager at the Atlanta firm. She drafted and redrafted an email, trying to explain what had happened without sounding like she was making excuses. Finally, she gave up and just wrote from the heart. Dear Ms. Peterson, I know you probably think I'm flaky or irresponsible for missing my flight today. I want you to know that's not who I am. I missed my flight because I helped an elderly man who was lost and confused in the airport. He needed to get to his gate and he couldn't do it alone. I knew I would miss my flight if I helped him, but I couldn't walk away. I understand if the position has been filled, but if there's any chance of rescheduling, I would be so grateful. I remain very interested in joining your team. Sincerely, Maya Jenkins. She hit send before she could overthink it, then put her phone away and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready for it or not. 3 days had passed since that morning in the airport, and Maya was trying her best to move on with her life. The hiring manager in Atlanta had responded, but it wasn't the response Maya had hoped for. The email was polite but firm. The position had been filled with another candidate. They appreciated her interest and wished her well in her job search. That was it. The door was closed. Maya had cried about it just once alone in her bathroom after the boys had gone to bed that first night back. She let herself have that moment of grief for what might have been. Then she washed her face, looked at herself in the mirror, and decided she was done feeling sorry for herself. Life went on. Bills still needed to be paid. Her boys still needed food and clothes and a mother who didn't fall apart. So here she was, back at her customer service job at a telecommunications company, sitting in her tiny cubicle that smelled like old coffee and recycled air. She was on her lunch break, eating a peanut butter sandwich she'd made at home because the cafeteria was too expensive. Her coworker Denise was at the next desk over, complaining about her ex-husband like she did every single day. Maya's computer dinged with an email notification. She almost ignored it, figuring it was just another promotional email or some company-wide announcement about the copy machine being broken again. But something made her look. The subject line read, "Thank you from Gate C-17. Her heart did a little jump. She clicked it open so fast she almost knocked her sandwich off her desk. The email was from Henry. Except it wasn't just from Henry. The email signature at the bottom made Maya's hands go numb. Henry Callahan III, founder and former chief executive officer, Callahan Airways. Callahan Airways, the airline she'd been flying that day. The airline Henry had been flying that day. He hadn't just been some random passenger. He'd founded the whole company. Maya's eyes flew back to the top of the email and she started reading, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Dear Maya, I hope this email finds you well. I've been thinking about you constantly since our meeting at the airport. Your kindness and selflessness touched me deeply, and I wanted to properly express my gratitude. I hope you'll forgive an old man for being a bit nosy, but I made some inquiries. I learned that you missed an important job interview because you helped me, and that the position was subsequently filled with another candidate. I cannot express how distressed this makes me feel. You should not have suffered consequences for doing a good deed. Maya had to stop reading for a moment. Her vision was getting blurry. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her eyes, and kept reading. I would like to offer you an opportunity to interview for a position within Callahan Airways. We are currently seeking a director of customer experience at our corporate headquarters in Dallas, Texas. Based on our brief time together and on what you demonstrated through your actions that day, I believe you would be an exceptional fit for this role. The position includes a comprehensive benefits package, competitive salary, and opportunities for advancement within the company. If you are interested, please contact my executive assistant, whose information is below, to schedule an interview at your earliest convenience. The email went on, but Maya had stopped processing the words. Her brain felt like it was short-circuiting. Director of Customer Experience at Callahan Airways. Corporate headquarters. Dallas, Texas. This wasn't just a job. This was a career. This was the kind of position she'd dreamed about, but never thought she'd actually have a chance at. At the bottom of the email was a separate paragraph. I've also included a check to cover your rebooking costs and any other expenses you incurred as a result of helping me. Please don't refuse this, Maya. You've already refused my thanks once. Don't make an old man feel useless. With deep gratitude and respect, Henry. Maya sat there staring at her computer screen, reading the email over and over again, certain she must be misunderstanding something. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. She pulled out her phone and Googled Henry Callahan Airways. The results that came up made her head spin. Article after article about the aviation pioneer who'd built Callahan Airways from nothing. Henry had started with a single prop plane doing mail runs in the 1960s and built it into one of the most respected airlines in the country. There were photos of him shaking hands with presidents, cutting ribbons at new airports, accepting awards for customer service excellence, and there, in the more recent articles from about 5 years ago, were the stories about his retirement following the death of his wife, Margaret. The articles talked about how he'd been a widower, who'd stepped back from daily operations to grieve. One article mentioned that he'd struggled with the loss, that friends were worried about him becoming reclusive. Maya thought about the confused, lost old man she'd helped through the airport. This was the same person? This titan of industry who'd built an empire? She'd had no idea. No clue at all. She'd just seen someone who needed help. You okay? Denise's voice cut through Maya's thoughts. You look like you've seen a ghost. Maya turned to her coworker, and she must have looked as shocked as she felt because Denise's expression changed from curious to concerned. I think, Maya said slowly, I think my life just changed. I need to make a phone call. Can you cover my line for a few minutes? Sure, honey. You go ahead. Maya grabbed her phone and practically ran to the stairwell, the one place in the building where she could get some privacy. Her hands were shaking as she pulled up the email again and found the number for Henry's executive assistant. She had to try 3 times to dial correctly because she kept hitting the wrong numbers. Good afternoon, Callahan Airways Executive Offices. This is Patricia speaking. Hi, yes, my name is Maya Jenkins. I received an email from Mr. Callahan about a job opportunity, and he said to call this number to schedule an interview. Oh, Ms. Jenkins. Yes, we've been expecting your call. Mr. Callahan spoke very highly of you. When would you be available to come to Dallas for an interview? Come to Dallas. Just like that. Like it was the simplest thing in the world. I would need to request time off from my current job. Could we possibly schedule something for next week? Absolutely. How does Tuesday at 10 a.m. sound? We'll arrange and cover all your travel expenses, of course. Flight, hotel, ground transportation, everything. You won't need to worry about any of that. Maya felt like she was in a dream. Tuesday at 10 would be perfect. Thank you so much, wonderful. I'll email you all the details within the hour. We're all very excited to meet you, Ms. Jenkins. Mr. Callahan doesn't often take such a personal interest in hiring decisions, so you must have made quite an impression. After Maya hung up, she just stood in the stairwell for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. She pulled up the internet on her phone and started researching Callahan Airways, reading everything she could find. The company had an excellent reputation, known for treating both employees and customers well. The pay scale she found for director-level positions made her jaw drop. Even the low end was triple what she was making now. Triple. That evening, after the boys were in bed, Maya sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and really dug into researching both the company and the position. She wanted to be prepared. This wasn't just a gift being handed to her. This was a real interview for a real job, and she needed to earn it on her own merits. Henry had opened the door, but she'd have to walk through it herself. She learned that the Director of Customer Experience position was actually a newly created role. Callahan Airways was trying to rebuild its customer service culture after some struggles in recent years. They'd had some bad press about flight delays and customer complaints. The company was investing heavily in training and new systems to improve the passenger experience. This position would be at the heart of that effort. Maya started making notes, ideas flowing as she thought about her own experiences, both as a customer and as someone who'd worked in customer service for years. She thought about the day she'd met Henry, about how easily he could have been overlooked or dismissed as just another confused old person, slowing everyone down. But he was a human being who needed help and deserved dignity and kindness. Wasn't that what customer service should be about? Not just processing people efficiently, but seeing them as human beings with needs and fears and hopes. She'd been on both sides of it. She'd been the customer who was treated like a number, like an inconvenience. She'd also been the service worker who was so overworked and underpaid that it was hard to bring genuine warmth to every interaction. She started drafting ideas for how to change the culture, how to empower frontline employees, how to build systems that encourage kindness rather than just speed. By the time she looked up, it was past midnight and she had pages of notes. The next few days at work were strange. Maya went through the motions of her job, answering calls, troubleshooting problems, being polite to angry customers who yelled at her about things that weren't her fault. But mentally, she was already somewhere else. She was preparing for this interview like her life depended on it, because in a way it did. She told her boys about the opportunity on Saturday morning over breakfast. They were eating pancakes, her specialty, and she'd been working up the nerve to mention it all morning. "So guys, I have something to tell you. I have a job interview on Tuesday, in Dallas." Michael looked up from his pancakes, his 15-year-old face showing interest. "Like another customer service job?" "No, this is different. This is a director position at an airline company. It's a really big opportunity." "Which airline?" David asked, always the one with the specific questions. "Callahan Airways. It's a long story how I got the interview. But the important thing is, if I get this job, it would change a lot for us. Good changes. We'd have more money, better insurance, more stability." "Would we have to move?" Michael asked, and Maya could hear the worry in his voice. Moving meant leaving his basketball team, his friends, his school. "I don't know yet. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, I have to actually get the job. But I wanted you guys to know what was happening, and I wanted to say thank you for being so understanding when I missed that other interview." "I know you were excited about that one." "The one where you helped that old guy at the airport?" David asked. "Yeah, that one." "Mom," Michael said seriously, "you did the right thing. We wouldn't want you to be the kind of person who doesn't help people just because it's inconvenient." Maya felt her throat get tight. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from you," he said simply, then went back to his pancakes like he hadn't just said the most beautiful thing she'd heard in months. That Tuesday morning, Maya got up at 4 a.m. to catch her flight to Dallas. This time, nothing went wrong. No alarm failures, no traffic jams. She arrived at the airport with plenty of time to spare. As she walked through the terminal, she thought about Henry. Wondered if he ever thought about that day, if he realized how much that chance encounter had meant to her. The flight was smooth. Callahan Airways had sent her a first-class ticket, and Maya sat in her comfortable seat feeling like she'd entered another world. The flight attendants were genuinely friendly, not just putting on professional smiles but actually seeming to care about passenger comfort. She could see why Henry had built such a successful company. The culture he'd created was evident in every interaction. When she landed in Dallas, there was a driver waiting for her with a sign that said, "Ms. Jenkins." He was polite and professional, took her bag and drove her to a nice hotel near the Callahan Airways headquarters. The company had booked her a room even though her interview wasn't until the next morning. They'd thought of everything. Maya barely slept that night in the hotel room. It was a nice room, probably the nicest hotel she'd stayed in since her honeymoon 15 years ago. But she couldn't stop her mind from racing. She kept going over her notes, rehearsing answers to potential interview questions, second-guessing every idea she'd had. What if they thought her ideas were too simple? What if she came across as not experienced enough for a director-level position? What if the whole thing was just charity because Henry felt guilty? At 6 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and got in the shower. She stood under the hot water for a long time, trying to wash away the nerves and doubt. She'd packed her best interview suit, a navy blue one that she'd bought for the Atlanta interview and never got to wear. She put it on carefully, paired it with a cream-colored blouse and her one pair of good heels. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked professional, capable, like someone who could actually be a director. The Callahan Airways headquarters was a gleaming glass building downtown, right in the heart of Dallas's business district. Maya's driver pulled up to the front entrance at 9:30, giving her plenty of time before her 10 o'clock interview. She thanked him, took a deep breath, and walked through the revolving doors into the lobby. The lobby was impressive without being intimidating. There were photos on the walls showing the history of the airline, from that first tiny mail plane to the modern fleet. In several of the older photos, she recognized a much younger Henry, always with that same kind smile. There was one photo in particular that caught her eye. It showed Henry and a beautiful woman with silver hair cutting a ribbon at what looked like an airport opening. The woman had to be Margaret, his late wife. They were looking at each other instead of the camera, and the love in that glance was so obvious it made Maya's chest ache. "Ms. Jenkins?" A woman's voice pulled Maya from her thoughts. She turned to see a professionally dressed woman in her 50s with a warm smile. "I'm Patricia. We spoke on the phone. Welcome to Callahan Airways." "Thank you so much for having me," Maya said, shaking her hand. "The pleasure is ours. Let me take you up to the conference room. Can I get you some coffee? Water? Anything?" "Water would be great, thank you." Patricia led her to the elevators and up to the 40th floor. The views from this high up were incredible. You could see the entire city spread out below. They walked down a hallway lined with more photos and some awards in glass cases. Customer Service Excellence 2018. Best Airline for Family Travel 2019. Employee Satisfaction Award 2020. The conference room Patricia showed her into was medium-sized with a large wooden table and comfortable chairs. Windows along one wall showed that amazing city view. There was already water, coffee, and some pastries set out on the table. "The interview panel will be with you in just a few minutes," Patricia said. "Try to relax. Mr. Callahan has told everyone how wonderful you are." After Patricia left, Maya sat down and tried to do exactly what she'd said. Relax. But her heart was pounding and her palms were sweaty. She took a sip of water and looked out at the city, trying to ground herself. The door opened and 3 people walked in. The first was a woman about Maya's age, professionally dressed with her hair in a neat bun. The second was a younger man, maybe in his 30s, carrying a tablet. And the third was Henry. Maya stood up immediately, a smile breaking across her face. Henry looked different than he had at the airport. He was wearing an expensive suit instead of that worn cardigan, and he walked without the walker, though she noticed he moved carefully and used a cane. But his eyes were the same, kind and warm, and when he saw her, his whole face lit up. "Maya, my dear, it's so wonderful to see you again," he said, coming around the table to give her a gentle hug. "You look absolutely wonderful. How are those boys of yours?" "They're great," Maya said, surprised and touched that he remembered. "They were very excited when I told them about this opportunity." "Good, good. Let me introduce you to everyone. This is Jennifer Morrison, our current Vice President of Operations, and this is Kevin Chen, our Director of Human Resources. They'll be conducting most of the interview, but I hope you don't mind if an old man sits in. I promise I'll try not to be distracting." They all sat down and Jennifer opened a folder in front of her. "Maya, we've reviewed your resume and I have to say your background in customer service is extensive. Can you tell us a bit about your current role and what you're looking for in a new position?" Maya had practiced this answer, but now, sitting in this room with these people who were all so much more accomplished than her, the words she'd rehearsed felt inadequate. She took a breath and decided to just be honest. "I currently work as a customer service representative for a telecommunications company. I spend my days on the phone with customers who are usually calling because something went wrong. They're frustrated, sometimes angry, and my job is to try to fix their problems while meeting certain time metrics and following specific scripts. It's exhausting, honestly. Not because the customers are difficult, but because the system doesn't allow me to really help them the way I'd like to. Everything is about speed and efficiency and keeping costs down, which I understand from a business perspective, but it means the human element gets lost." She paused, wondering if she was being too negative, but Jennifer was nodding. So she continued, "What I'm looking for is an opportunity to be part of building something better. A place where customer service isn't just about processing people as quickly as possible, but about genuinely caring for them and making their experience as positive as it can be. I know that sounds idealistic, but I believe it's possible. And I believe it's actually good business, not just the right thing to do morally. People remember how you make them feel. Can you give us an example of a time when you went above and beyond for a customer?" Kevin asked, typing notes on his tablet. Maya almost laughed because the example that immediately came to mind was Henry, but she couldn't say that with him sitting right there. Instead, she told them about a customer from a few months ago, an elderly woman who had called because her internet wasn't working. It turned out the woman was trying to video chat with her grandson, who was deployed overseas, and this was their only way of staying connected. The technical issue was actually something I couldn't fix remotely. It required a service visit, and the next available appointment was 3 days away. But this woman was so distressed and her grandson's leave was ending soon. I spent my entire lunch break and stayed late after my shift ended. working with different departments, calling in favors, until I found a technician who agreed to stop by her house that evening on his way home. It wasn't by the book, and I didn't get any credit for it officially, but that woman's tearful thank you when she called back to tell me she'd been able to talk to her grandson made it worth it. The interview continued for over an hour. They asked her about conflict resolution, about managing teams, about her vision for customer experience. Maya answered every question as honestly as she could, drawing on her years of experience but also on her observations and ideas. She talked about empowering frontline employees, about making sure they were paid well enough and treated well enough that they could bring their best selves to work. She talked about building systems that encouraged human connection rather than just transaction processing. Henry didn't say much during the interview, but Maya could see him nodding occasionally, a small smile on his face. Finally, Jennifer closed her folder and looked at Maya directly. I have one more question, and it's about something we're all aware of. Mr. Callahan has told us the story of how you two met. Can you tell us in your own words why you made the choice you did that day? You knew you were sacrificing something important. What made you do it? Maya thought about her answer carefully. This felt like the most important question of the whole interview. I could say it was because he reminded me of my grandfather, which is true, or that I was raised to help people, which is also true. But I think the real answer is simpler than that. I saw another human being who needed help, and I had the ability to provide that help. Everything else, the job interview, the flight, the money I'd spent on the ticket, all of that was important, but it wasn't more important than a person's dignity and safety. We live in a world that moves so fast, where everyone is so focused on their own goals and deadlines that we forget to see each other. I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to look back and know I'd walked past someone who needed me, because I was too busy thinking about myself. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Henry spoke for the first time in the interview. That right there is exactly why I wanted you here. That philosophy, that way of seeing people, that's what this company was built on. It's what we've lost sight of in recent years, if I'm being honest. We got too big, too focused on the bottom line, and we forgot that we're in the business of taking care of people. Not just transporting them from place to place, but actually caring for them, making them feel valued and safe and seen. He turned to Jennifer and Kevin. I think we've heard enough, don't you? They exchanged glances and Maya's stomach dropped. Was that it? Was it over? Had she done something wrong? Jennifer smiled, and it was a genuine, warm smile. Maya, pending a background check and reference verification, which I'm sure will be fine, we'd like to offer you the position of Director of Customer Experience. The salary range is between $140,000 and $160,000 annually, depending on experience, with full benefits including health insurance, retirement matching, and flight privileges for you and your immediate family. You'd start as soon as you're able to relocate to Dallas. How does that sound? Maya couldn't speak. Her throat had closed up completely. $140,000. That was more money than she'd ever imagined making. That was private school for the boys if they wanted it. That was a house instead of an apartment. That was security and stability and breathing room. She started, her voice coming out scratchy. She cleared her throat and tried again. I would be honored to accept. Thank you so much. I promise you won't regret this. We know we won't, Henry said firmly. Welcome to the Callahan Airways family, Maya. The rest of the meeting was a blur of paperwork and discussions about start dates and relocation assistance. The company would help her find housing in Dallas, would cover moving expenses, would give her a month to wrap up her current job and get the boys enrolled in new schools. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. When it was finally over and Jennifer and Kevin had left to start processing the paperwork, Henry asked Maya if she'd walk with him for a minute. They went out onto a terrace attached to the executive floor. The wind was strong this high up, and Maya had to hold her hair back from her face. I want you to know something, Henry said, leaning on his cane and looking out at the city. This isn't charity. This isn't me feeling guilty or trying to pay you back for helping me. You earned this position based on your experience, your ideas, and your character. Yes, I opened the door for you, but you walked through it on your own merit. Do you understand that? I think so, Maya said. It's just a lot to process. A week ago, I was worried about making rent, and now I'm going to be a director at one of the biggest airlines in the country. You know what I saw in you that day at the airport? Henry asked. I saw someone who understood what really matters. Not money, not status, not personal advancement, but human connection and dignity. That's rare, Maya, especially in someone who's clearly been through their own struggles. Most people who've had it hard become hard themselves. You stayed soft. You stayed kind. That's a strength, not a weakness. 2 months later, Maya stood in the lobby of Callahan Airways headquarters, but this time she wasn't a nervous interviewee. She was an employee. Director of Customer Experience, according to the badge hanging around her neck. It still felt surreal sometimes, like she might wake up and discover this was all an elaborate dream. The move to Dallas had been chaotic, but exciting. The boys had been nervous about changing schools, but Callahan Airways had connected her with a real estate agent who helped her find a great house in a good school district. Not a mansion, nothing crazy, but a real house with a yard and enough bedrooms that the boys didn't have to share anymore. Michael had already joined the basketball team at his new school. David had found a robotics club that met on Saturdays. They were adjusting better than Maya had dared to hope. Her first few weeks at work had been overwhelming. She'd spent most of her time learning the systems, meeting people, understanding the scope of the problems she was supposed to solve. Customer satisfaction scores had been declining for 3 years. Employee turnover in customer-facing positions was high. The company had grown so focused on efficiency and cost-cutting that the culture of care Henry had built had eroded. But Maya hadn't come here to make small changes. She'd come here to transform things, and Henry, bless him, had given her the authority and budget to do it. Today was the launch of the first major initiative, and she was terrified and excited in equal measure. The event was being held in the company's largest conference center. Employees from all over the country had flown in. Gate agents, flight attendants, customer service representatives, baggage handlers, the people who actually interacted with passengers every single day. Maya had insisted they be the first to hear about the changes, not the executives. Henry had loved that idea. Maya checked her notes one more time, even though she practically had the presentation memorized. She'd worked on it for weeks, refining every word. This had to land right. If the frontline employees didn't buy in, nothing else would matter. Ready? Patricia appeared beside her, looking calm and professional as always. In the past 2 months, she'd become more than Henry's assistant to Maya. She'd become a friend and mentor, someone who understood the company's history and politics and was always willing to share wisdom.